Hello, it is Jack Gill, and welcome back to part two of the youth show. This is episode one of the new season, part two. I am joined by James. Again, I hope you enjoyed part one. If you haven't yet watched part one, don't worry, go ahead and watch that now. This one, we've got loads to talk about. We're going to preview the Community Shield at the weekend, of course. We've got discussion on Rhian Brewster. We're talking about Greenwood and Foden's England call-ups, Camavinga getting a French call-up, and much, much more. But we'll start with a preview for the Community Shield, James. It's going to be one that's not played by many first-team players. I think it's going to be a lot of youngsters thrown in by both sides. Arsenal have, of course, only played one pre-season fixture. They were only back in pre-season training this week, I understand, because of playing in the FA Cup final and stuff like that. I think there's going to be a lot of youngsters playing, James.
Yeah, definitely, and it's going to be treated, I think, especially by Arsenal as a game to get their fitness back, ready for the start of the season properly, ready for when the Premier League resumes. Because this is, it is a glorified friendly at the best of times. Now more so, we've got a couple of little niggling injuries that I think we'll see a couple of the squad players get more minutes than usual, and then Arsenal as well. I think it'll be a good mix of young lads and senior lads who they need to get into shape for the coming weeks.
Yeah, it's a glorified Asia trophy, really, isn't it? It's one of them where it's a giant 50p at the end of the day, where if you win it, it's nice to put in the silverware cabinet, but if you don't win, you're not too arsed, really. And I think this season it's further thrown into turmoil by obviously having to be moved forwards because they've stuck an international break just before the start of the season for some weird reason. But nonetheless, it's going to be good to see the Reds in action. I think I've really enjoyed these two pre-season friendlies against Salzburg and Stuttgart. And yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of youngsters, and I like watching the young lads at Liverpool. I like seeing how they're doing. I think it's going to be good to watch Nico Williams play before he gets his first caps for Wales, hopefully. I think Rhian Brewster, everyone's eyes are on him at the minute. Billy Koumetio, will he get some action? Harvey Elliott, Curtis Jones. There's lots to look forward to in this game. Equally, though, James, Arsenal have lots of young talent that we'll be keeping our eye on in that game as well.
Definitely, you've got Willock, you've got Saka, you've potentially got Maitland-Niles, who we'll touch upon later on. They have an abundance of young players too. Martinelli, who's a very, very good young striker. It's going to be interesting to see how they line up and how many minutes they give to young lads, or whether they actually start them. And you use that time to give their senior players maybe a bit more of a rest and then give them a run out at the end to get their fitness up. So it's hard to predict a game like this because you just have absolutely no idea how either team are going to approach it, whether they're going to approach it as a competitive fixture or just see it as a way of getting minutes in for as many players as possible.
I'm excited to see young Saliba as well. I think he's a brilliant ball-playing centre half. I think it'll be good to see how he does this season at Arsenal. I think he impressed on loan last season, and he's come back now, and he's ready to start for the first team. I think he's an Arteta sort of centre back as well, so it'll be good to see how he does. I think it's one of them situations where we're going to see two mixed teams starting, similarly to the 5-5 last year in the EFL Cup. But I think that's why a lot of people are excited, because they saw that game and it was very much attack, and little defence. So maybe we'll see similar lineups from both clubs at the weekend. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think anyone can predict either lineup, really. It's going to be very hard. It's going to be interesting to watch Chris's lineup prediction later on in the week. Hopefully it's a very good game nonetheless, and maybe Liverpool will bring home that giant 50p. One player that we mentioned there, James, in being excited about seeing in that game at the weekend is a certain Rhian Brewster, who scored 3 goals in 2 games for us in 2 pre-season matches. He's a lad that many eyes were on at the start of last season. Sort of faded. He went to Swansea on loan in January, which was needed. We spoke loads about this and why that was needed. It was important for his fitness, regaining it. And now he ended that loan in fantastic form, as we've said so many times, James. He is a proven goal scorer. There's one thing for sure with Rhian Brewster: he will bring you goals. He is a natural goal scorer. there's been lots of discussion on this. He is now expected to go out on loan to a Premier League club this season. Sheffield United are apparently the club who are most likely to bring him in. There's names like Brighton as well. I believe Villa are interested. Leeds and West Brom, I think, would have been good moves for him as well. But Leeds bringing in Rodrigo, of course, now. James, what do you make of all this? I want a decent sized conversation on this because it's divided opinion really. But what do you think is best for Brewster next?
There's no point sending him out on loan unless he's going to get consistent minutes for me. And whether that's at a Premier League team or whether that's at Liverpool, he needs to be playing at least 50% of the matches that he's available for. Otherwise, he's just not going to be kicking on. We know he's a goal scorer and he needs to be allowed to do that. And the best way to have someone scoring goals is playing them consistently and giving them that momentum where he might score in his first 3 games, but that he's getting used to play, he's getting used to having the ball at his feet, and the goals will come. We saw whether it's, last season at Swansea, we saw it at youth level, we saw it in pre-season for Liverpool, that he knows what he's good at, and if he's allowed to play to his strengths, he will excel. So, whether he goes to Sheffield United or Brighton, he needs to be playing, at least 20 games over that course of the season, where we know he probably won't get every single minute available to him because he is a young lad, but he needs to be playing consistently.
Absolutely. There's been a lot in the last year about Rhian Brewster and comparisons to Mason Greenwood. And one thing's sure, when you're comparing the two, is that they're both outstanding finishers. And, there's a lot talking about Rhian Brewster, and there's a lot to say about this young lad. He's an outstanding player, and he does what he does very good. But there's also a lot for him to learn as well. Yeah. And at times, when you're looking at him in the system, in Liverpool's system, the typical 4-3-3 that we play with that false 9, when we've tried to adapt Brewster into that, that's not his typical game. That's not the way he plays. That's not his style. And that's why when a lot of people put a lot on his shoulders last year, just as he was coming back to fitness and he had all this to learn, it was very difficult for him to adapt to this so quickly. So he went out on loan. He played in that natural number 9 position for Swansea and impressed. Everyone knew he would impress. People that watched Rhian Brewster and know his game knew that he would impress on that loan. You knew that in the Championship, in that number 9 position, he would excel and be outstanding. He's come back. He's done what he's done, and he did last pre-season and impressed again because he's a good finisher. He's hungry. He knows what he's good at. He's in the right place at the right time. And there's the same questions all over again, James, where actually so many people want to see more of this lad, and that's what he does to you. He grips you in. He's an outstanding player. You just want to see more. You want to see this lad on the pitch because everyone knows what he's capable of. But I think personally, for me, when you're looking at Brewster in our system, I think actually he may be better out wide for us. And I've mentioned this before. I think actually in a sort of Salah position where, Salah is the man who, yes, he plays out wide, but he interchanges with Bobby. He ends up being the number 9 a lot of the time. I think that's where Brewster's best position in this current Liverpool side would be. And I think we either be prepared to model him and play him in that sort of position, or I think maybe another year out on loan, proving that he can do he can do it in the Premier League, and maybe at a club like Sheffield United where they have a complex style and a unique style of play. I think it would be very good for him, James.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting thought that he could play out wide because he ticks all the boxes for what we look for in a wide player. But I think regardless of that, he needs to improve his tactical awareness first and foremost. Technically, he's brilliant. He's a brilliant shooter. We know that. But he needs to learn how to play in different systems, and going out to Sheffield could be a really interesting one for him because he will be able to learn from a very good coach, and then play in a competitive environment where he's not going to be expected to play the same way each week. He'll have to adapt, and that'll show what he's made of, whether he's got that fight or flight in him.
Yeah, there's lots of arguments, lots of debates, but at the end of the day, everyone knows that Brewster is good at finishing. Everyone knows he's good at what he does. Everyone knows that at times Liverpool lack that, but there's so much more he needs to learn and that he can learn on a loan deal. But I think, like you said before, James, it's so important that we get guarantees of game time. And we put a tweet out on the Academy channel, and there were lots of discussions like, actually, if he's good enough, he'll play. You don't need to guarantee game time. If he's good enough, he'll make sure that he cements himself and he guarantees himself that game time. But I think it's important for clubs when you want a player to learn, and we've seen this similar with Ben Woodburn when he went on loan to Sheffield United. and he didn't get regular game time. With Rhian Brewster, we want him to go there, and we want to be ensured that he will get game time there, and he will get the game time that he needs, and that's why that's why he would leave Liverpool on loan at the end of the day. It would be for more game time at a high level. So that's the important thing there. But let us know what you think in the comments about Rhian Brewster. What's best for him? What would you like to see happen with his future? So let us know in the comments. Let's talk about England now, James. Call-ups for Greenwood and Foden, which I think is absolutely deserved. I think both of them were brilliant since the restart and before that actually as well. They've had good seasons, both of them, and they're looking they're looking to cement themselves as permanent players in first team squads now. Greenwood looking to guarantee himself to see himself as a guaranteed starter for Manchester United. Foden looks like he might be David Silva's replacement.
Yeah, definitely. He's got that technical ability. He's shown that tactical versatility as well, where he's able to play in different roles and he's still able to excel. And it's only right that they've been rewarded with their impressive form of a call-up to the England team. And, obviously, we'll talk in a minute about how Bukayo Saka wasn't included. And, arguably he deserved it more than anyone else. But it shows that Southgate is willing to trust the youth. And we've seen in the past that he's not afraid to call up lads who potentially haven't got the most experience, but they've got that more ability. And I'm more than happy with him picking players like that over the established ones who, you know what you're getting week in, week out. They're not going to excite the fans. They're not going to push England along. We know what they can do and it's not worked. These young lads will be able to offer something different and, potentially get England late into the stages of the next Euros and World Cup the year after.
Absolutely. There's a lot of talking points about this, James, and we'll start firstly with the whole Grealish debate now. According to the Premier League, Grealish is a young player, and so is Anthony Martial, but that's a different debate for another day. But yeah, he's not been called up. There's a lot of controversy over this. People believe he should have been. But it's good to see Southgate putting faith in the youth. And I think Foden is a player that's going to be extremely important for this England side in future years. I think he looks outstanding. And, he's only going to grow as a player with more first team appearances because actually Guardiola's not played him enough really to see enough of it so far. But you saw after the restart what he's capable of. He's an absolutely outstanding player. When given minutes, he will perform and he will impress. And Greenwood as well. I think, as I said before, he's an outstanding finisher. His power, the power he puts behind the ball at times, is phenomenal and mind blowing, really. But yeah, he deserved the call up too. But what do you make of the whole Grealish situation, James? Do you think he should have been called up, or do you think it's good to see young players like Greenwood and Foden, players for the future, be interested?
I mean, obviously, I'm glad to see the youth come in, but I think Grealish does deserve that. And when you've got players being called up that haven't really performed recently, like Eric Dyer or someone that's not experienced like Calvin Phillips, who will be a very good Premier League player in the future. It's what else does Jack Grealish have to do? He was told when he was in the Championship that he needs Premier League experience. He's done that. He's shown that he can do it and he can perform at a top level. And he's still not getting called up. But at the same time, Phillips, who has no Premier League experience, is getting called up. And he offers that tenacity, he offers a bit of nastiness when he plays, and you need that if you want to succeed at the top level. And I think he'd be an asset to this England team. He can score goals, he can create, but he can also play in a deeper role or out wide. And I don't know what else he has to do, to be honest.
It's interesting though, because I know Gareth Southgate has spoken about this, James, and I mentioned youngsters there, and I know Grealish is only 24 himself. He still could be a very important player for this England side. But Gareth Southgate said actually he doesn't really see him as a midfield player, as an 8, which I completely agree with. I think Gareth Southgate loves his workhorses. He loves his, Hendersons, his Dyers, his Winks, his midfielders that will work for you. And Grealish isn't necessarily one of them. And I think when it comes to his best position, it's probably in the 10 or out wide. And actually, when you look at England, wide left, we've got England have got an abundance of talents, and in the 10 as well, there's a lot of competition for Grealish. So I think he's going to have to keep working and keep showing that he deserves that England cap. But I don't think he's too far away from it. I think we'll talk about Saka now, because I think in my head, he was probably closer to getting an England cap now than Jack Grealish, and that is because obviously they've got a lot of players out injured in that left back position. They haven't actually called up. Gareth Southgate hasn't called up a left back. Very interesting. I know James Ward-Prowse will probably play their left wing back maybe. But I think this was the perfect time to call up Saka, James. No?
There's absolutely no. I can't understand why he didn't call up a left back. It doesn't make any sense. You know, I'm not an England fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I'd still want to see a left back called up by the national team. It doesn't make any sense to me. You know, you've got two of your go-to left backs out injured. It makes sense to call up, you know, arguably the best young left back in the country last season, and to let him play. I know Southgate said that he sees him as a winger. You know, same as Grealish, he sees him as a forward, not a defender. But you know, for the sake of giving him minutes somewhere where you know he's going to perform, it would make sense just to play him there and then look to move him further up the field in the future.
You've got the perfect opportunity to go, right, we're going to play three at the back, we're going to play Saka left wing back, Trent right wing back. You know, we're going to see how it is. We're going to experiment. You know, it's an international break at the end of the day. It's before the season. It's still technically pre-season. Let's just try it. But no, he's not going to do it. It really confuses me. I don't get it at all. But, you know, I think he'll probably still try that with James Ward-Prowse off the left. But, you know, it was the perfect time to call up Saka. He's really impressed at the end of last season. He got Europa League Player of the Season, which I think he fully deserved, ahead of Kai Havertz, Young Player of the Season, that is, sorry. But yeah, I'm absolutely flabbergasted at why he didn't get called up. So yeah, but similarly, Dwight McNeil didn't get called up for England's under-21s, James, which I think is also a disgrace.
Yeah, I don't really understand that one either. You know, he got 2 goals and 6 assists in, you know, not the best of Burnley teams, but he played consistent, you know, played every single game for them, started every single game. And, you know, he's not a flashy player. He's not necessarily the standout player that, you know, your Sakas are or your Greenwoods, but he is a very good young player who's good. He's tactically versatile. He knows how to improve himself. He knows what he needs to do to improve, and to not call him up, I just don't really understand why.
He's a safe bet, isn't he? He's a safe player.
You know what you're getting.
That's what these England managers have seemed to love over the years, and you know he was one of Burnley's best players last season. You know, Burnley are the best of sides to watch. We don't really like Burnley, but Dwight McNeil looks a very good young talent, and for him to be overlooked by the under-21s, I think is ridiculous. But yeah, so there were some questionable decisions by the England camp. It was weird as well, the whole Maguire situation with everything going on there, but that's a discussion for another time. But yeah, let us know what you think in the comments again about those England selections. For me, Greenwood and Foden's was completely deserved. What do you think about Grealish? What do you think about Saka? Are you as confused as me and James? And then as for Dwight McNeil, I know a lot of Burnley fans are angered by that. Yeah, and I would be too. It is very, very strange. To move on, we're going to talk about some transfers that have happened. We have to talk about Troy Parrott. He moved to Millwall on loan. James, this is a lad that we spoke about last season, a lad that we're excited to see more of from a first-team point of view. We're excited to see him get some first-team minutes somewhere. I think it's a good move for him, a championship club. Gets to live in London still, of course, kind of close to Tottenham. Not a bad move, eh?
Yeah, really good move from, you know, we saw, obviously, against us, particularly how good he is, and I'm glad that we won't have to face him again next season, because he is a very good young player. He can play anywhere on the front line. He's a brilliant goal scorer. He's absolutely rapid as well. And, you know, I think this could be a very good loan move for him. He might not necessarily play every single game, but that's not what this loan move's about. It's about getting him used to senior football, and then next season looking to make that step up or play a little bit more consistently.
Yeah, you have to praise Tottenham and Jose Mourinho as well. I think they were in a striker crisis for a long time last season, and so many people put pressure on them to give Troy Parrott a chance. But this was a lad that at the start of last season was playing in the under-18s, and Mourinho sort of said, look, he's a young lad, he's simply not ready yet, and he's got his loan move now. Now's his time to shine. Now's his time to go, look, I can do it at a first-team level, and then they'll probably do what we're looking to do at Brewster, have a look at him and see if he fancies a Premier League loan or what happens next at that point in time. But I think everyone at Tottenham knows that Parrott is an impressive young talent and that he will impress out on loan. But they've just got to give him the chance, and they've got to see what he can do at championship level and what he can do with Millwall. So I think it's good to put him under the limelight there and see how he can do in the championship, James.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you know, it's about testing players at a top level and seeing what they're made of. And, you know, he's not necessarily ready for that Premier League step up yet, but in a couple of years' time, he might be. And it doesn't, saw with Harry Kane that, one day you're playing lower league football out on loan, and the next season you're one of the top scorers in the Premier League. It doesn't take much. You just need to find that confidence, find your rhythm, and then you can, see what they're made of and see how they adapt to senior football at the top level.
It was so easy though for Mourinho to throw him in the dark and go, you know what, here's his performance, play in the Premier League, play in the Premier League, play in the Premier League, start for us here. At Tottenham, you can't really do that. He wasn't ready, understandably so. And now he goes on the Championship loan, and there'll be a lot of eyes on him to impress. I think it's a similar thing with Oliver Skip to Norwich, James. He goes to a good Championship club. We've seen him in little performances there for Tottenham. But it'll be good to see him on a regular basis in the Championship and how he can do with what will be a good Championship side in Norwich and in a side that are looking to bounce immediately back to the Premier League.
Yeah, he's a good tidy midfielder, and it could have been easy to throw him into that first team and potentially rush him in, but they've taken their time. They set up to somewhere where he will probably enjoy time on the ball. He'll be able to develop his game a little bit more, play in a competitive environment, and hopefully play at a high level. I hope that Norwich do come back up next season, because they were refreshing when they were playing the Championship the season before last, and Oliver Skip hopefully will be central to that, because it's always good to see young players trusted with minutes and trusted with responsibility when they're looking to break through.
A club I want to talk about is Leeds United, James. Obviously, Liverpool's first opposition on the first game of the season in the Premier League. They've done some tiny transfer business that has gone under the radar, to be honest with you. I think what they're doing is they're not just preparing for now in the Premier League. I think they're preparing to sustain their Premier League status. They've brought in some really, really good young players. They're bringing in Sam Greenwood from Arsenal. I don't think that's quite done yet, but it's almost there. They're beating off tough competition. I believe United were one of the clubs interested there. They got Joe Geldart from Wigan, who we know ourselves. We watched him against our youth side earlier on in the season, and he really, really impressed, scored a couple of goals. Yeah. Was outstanding, and I know Liverpool ourselves had a look at him. And 16-year-old Charlie Allen from Linfield, who I know impressed for them too, and has looked very good for them. So, James, it's very important, and Leeds and the Bielsa have been so good at this. They've got Jack Harrison in on another loan from Manchester City as well. They're not just preparing for their short-term status in the Premier League, are they? They want to become that massive club that they once were again.
Yeah, I mean, we saw when Leeds were last in the Premier League that their model wasn't sustainable. They spent a lot of money on players, and ultimately it blew up in their face, and they went down, and they were in bad financial trouble. And they've not necessarily avoided spending money. They've just brought in Rodrigo, Helder Costa, and Ilham Meslier for about 45 million altogether. But they're planning for the future too. They're looking at these young lads, Joe Geldart, Cody Drammer, Pascal Schroek, who's coming up from their youth team, and they will have value in the future, and it could potentially save them a similar amount to that in 2-3 years' time.
Yeah, I really like this situation at Leeds at the minute. I think Bielsa is such a Liverpool coach, and it's really good to watch them grow. I think they're going to be another Wolves, where they'll come up and they'll really impress and start to push for European spots and stuff. They're really, really impressive Leeds. It's going to be interesting to see how they do this season. I know this is the youth show, but Rodrigo is an incredible signing for them, a fantastic signing. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch Leeds this season. Another young player that might be on the move is Florian Balogun. We spoke about him earlier on in part one. He was fantastic in Premier League 2 last season. I believe he got 15 goals in 10 games, or 10 goals in 15 games, one way or the other. It was a fantastic season for him in Premier League 2, James. He's probably on the move. Southampton are a club interested in him. Brentford had a £5 million move in January turned down, I believe. Southampton want him, but Arsenal want £8 million.
I mean, it's a big fee, but going to Southampton, he will be able to play under a brilliant manager. And the Brentford project is an interesting one. I do like the way they do things down there, and I think it would be a good environment to succeed. But the fact that Southampton, could potentially be willing to meet that 8 million valuation speaks testament as to how good the player is. We've seen this season how good of a goal scorer he is, and I have no doubt that he will be able to make that step up to senior level next season. Whether that will be likely not at Arsenal, but potentially, at Southampton or even the Championship. There's no shame in dropping down the division to make sure you get consistent minutes, because there's no guarantee that Southampton will play him, as much as he will be hoping to be played.
Stuttgart, obviously German club Stuttgart, are reportedly interested in him as well. I did check. He finished as top goal scorer. It was 10 goals in 15 games in Premier League 2. And the 19-year-old has only got a year left on his contract, James. He's not budged. He doesn't want to sign a new contract, refusing Arsenal's terms. So the fact that they're not budging on 8 million, you know we both know he's a brilliant goal scorer. But you know, it's very it's a tough stance for a club to do that when he might even leave on a free next season.
Yeah, exactly. It's very ballsy, and they clearly do rate him highly. Whether they'd be asking for such a high fee, but you'd assume that they'd be working to get a new contract to him ASAP, or at least extend it to make sure that he retains this value. Because if he doesn't make the move this window and sign that contract in January, he could potentially make an agreement to go elsewhere, and they'd get a quarter of that in a tribunal fee because he's not yet an established first team player. He's not played much for the first team, if at all.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I think it'll be very interesting. I think Brentford's probably the best club for him. I think they're going to lose a lot of players this summer. Ollie Watkins, side Ben Rama linked away. They're also linked with Ivan Toney from Peterborough, but I think it'll be a good move for him to go there. As you said before, I like the Brentford project. I think it's a fantastic project, and hopefully it'd see a lot of game time there. He's still a young player, of course, as well. And I think going to Southampton, as you say, he wouldn't get too much game time straight away. But he's a player that I want to watch at first team level, and I think Brentford would be a very good club for that young lad.
Mm-hmm.
Talking of youngsters as well, Jamal Lewis is another one we have to speak about, James. He was so close to what would have been a dream move to Liverpool. It all fell through. Norwich aren't budging on that 20 million price tag for him. Leicester were also interested, but apparently have also been put off by that 20 million tag. You have to feel sorry for him, don't you, James? He seems good enough to we know he's good enough to play in the Premier League. He seems far too good at his age to be back in the Championship again. But he seems to be priced out of a move.
Yeah, I mean, I still expect him to go to Leicester. I think a deal probably could be made around 15 million plus add-ons that will come through within the next, year or two, realistic add-ons. But, Leicester have got the money now after selling Chilwell for, I'm not sure what the fee is, but I know it's going to be 50 million.
Yeah.
So they've got the money to buy an adequate replacement and someone who, isn't the finished article yet, but has potential to be a very good Premier League player. And there aren't many players available for such a price that have that Premier League experience that they could go and target, other than Jamal Lewis.
Yeah, I know they're looking at Tagliafico as well, which I think some will probably wonder if they're getting a better deal after that because he's probably a cheaper option that is arguably a better left back than Ben. Well, but yeah, I think I feel bad for Jamal Lewis. I thought he would probably go to Tottenham personally. I thought it would be a great move for Tottenham. We know they're close to signing Matt Doherty as well, which I think is another story. I think that's a fantastic move for both parties, really. I think they're getting him incredibly cheap as well. Another one to talk about, another little transfer. Wolves interested in Ainsley Maitland-Niles, James. Apparently they had their opening bid rejected. I think Arsenal are looking for around. They're looking for a decent fee for him by the looks of it. But nonetheless, James, it'll be a fantastic move for Wolves. That.
Yeah, definitely. They're getting someone who is, by all definitions, a utility man, but he's very good in the positions that he can fill in. Whether that's right back or centre mid. I've seen here that Arsenal are looking for at least 20 million, while Wolves were willing to offer 15. And whether that's too much, he has got Premier League experience, so that does go in his favour. We know what he's good at, and we know that he would fit into that Wolves team probably quite well, especially if Doherty does make a move away to Tottenham, which seems to be only a matter of days away. A straight swap, they wouldn't be getting that, raw talent straight away that Doherty offers. He is a very good player, but in a like-for-like replacement price-wise, it wouldn't be the worst deal in the world.
Yeah, I absolutely think this deal will accelerate over the next few days. We know the Doherty deal's closed, and I think the reason that is closed is because Wolves know that they can replace him with Maitland-Niles. Their opening bid of £15 million rejected, as you say. Arsenal want 20, and I don't think it'll be a problem for Wolves to pay that extra £5 million. I think it will be a brilliant replacement for Wolves. I think it'll be a very, very good signing for them. We know that they're very good at stuff like that. They're very good in the market, aren't they, Wolves? I think this is another example of that. Eduardo Camavinga as well, obviously a midfielder from Rennes, 17 years old, has been given his first French call-up, James. Absolutely deserved, isn't it?
Yeah, he's arguably the best young midfielder or the best ball winner midfielder in the world right now. Young player. He's so good. He makes it look so easy, and his stats are incredible. And it's a shame that Pogba's had to miss out due to catching the virus, from what I've heard. But Camavinga is more than capable of making that step up, and it was only a matter of when, if not if, because he is a very, very good young player, and it's only a matter of time as well until he steps up to a better senior team, with no disrespect to Rennes.
Yeah, definitely. I know there's a lot of eyes on him across Europe, and will be on him to see how he gets on with his first France call-up, and what happens with him this season. I think if he can emulate last season, then definitely there's going to be so many clubs across Europe after this young lad.
I think Real Madrid, would be a very good destination for him. They'll be looking to replace, Casemiro in the near future and get a successor in. And I think Camavinga has Madrid written all over him.
It won't just be Madrid, James. There'll be so many clubs after him. I think PSG will probably be after him as well. With him being at Rennes, I think there'll be lots and lots of clubs after him. Barca as well. There seems to be a new project for Barca going on, which we'll talk about in a minute. Alphonso Davies, obviously winning the Champions League with Bayern, really impressed this season. James, he's one of the best left backs in the world right now. There's lots of discussion suggesting that he's the best even, but Robertson argues with that. But nonetheless, James, he's had an outstanding season, hasn't he? He's been fantastic, and he's going to be a world class left back for a long time.
Yeah, he's a top level player. He's a model professional too. He's come into that senior team not out of place, and he's playing the game the role he's expected to play his way, and not adjusting it. And he is playing like a winger at left back. That's not necessarily a bad thing. We know how good he is up front. We saw him play when he was back in Canada as a forward, but he's adapted perfectly to left back, and he had something that like Trent, not a lot of players in that position can offer, whether that's raw ability on the ball or his crossing. He's so good, and I think he's going to be the best left back within the next 5 years.
He's not flawless, is he? He's absolutely not flawless. There's loads of him for him still to learn. But one thing that helps him is when he makes a mistake, his recovery runs are sensational. He's so fast and so aware that actually when a mistake is made, he's back there. He's ready. He's recovered from it.
Same as Van Dijk. He's not perfect, but when he is caught out of position, he's able to recover perfectly and cover up for those deficiencies, which are few.
Joe Gomez is very similar to that as well. A lot of the times you see him out of position, but he's so fast and so able to recover quickly that it makes for a sensational defender. And I think Alphonso Davies, like you say, in 5 years' time, the sky's the limit for this lad. He looks outstanding, and as you say, he's doing it his own way. He's doing it the new breed of fullback way, and we've seen young players coming through. We spoke about Maitland-Niles. You're looking at Tariq Lamptey, Alphonso Davies, players like this. I think that new breed of fullback that Robertson and Trent themselves have created looks to be outstanding, and I think a lot of people are excited by the future of Alphonso Davies. We're going to end this with a little discussion, James. We're going to talk about Barcelona. Now, we saw them crash out of the Champions League to Bayern terribly. You'd hate to be a Barca fan right now. Ha 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 ha. But yeah, anyway, we're going to talk about them. Messi rumored to want to leave. Hopefully he doesn't end up at City. But yeah, that's been the rumour of the week, really. Suarez looks like he's on his way out. There's been loads about Gerard Piqué. Apparently Fulham are reportedly interested in him. Ronald Koeman is their new manager. James, what is the best direction for them to go in now?
Well, they need to clear up, don't they? They've been stagnating for years now, where they've had players who are at the club who are still top-level players, but they're not the players who are going to take them forward. And it's good to see that they've brought in players like Pedri. They've trusted players like Ricky Pig. Hopefully, Charles Elena go forward. Trincao was unveiled yesterday. Very good young players. It's promising. Obviously Frankie de Jong as well in the midfield, but they need to move on. Some of the older players, like the Luis Suarez's, who are scoring goals, but his work rate is not going to take them forward. He's not in the best shape. He's not in the shape of his career anymore. And whether that means Messi having to move on to free up some funds, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because you can't expect him to keep performing at a top level when you're going through a rebuild, because he's only got 2-3 years left.
That's the thing. They absolutely need a rebuild, and you can do what they've done for a number of years, really, and stagnate, because they're trying to build a team to win the Champions League again, and they've bought in a lot of older players that, as you mentioned, they've also bought in some young players, and they've spent a lot of money, but it hasn't worked. You look at Griezmann last season; they played him out of position after spending a lot of money. You look at Dembele, who was bought in for a lot of money, but hasn't really done anything at Barcelona. It hasn't been trusted by manager after manager after manager. Look at Ansu Fati, we've seen glimpses of him, but we want to see more. He looks like a very good young player. And, at the same time, we've seen loads of young players be let go from Barcelona and really, really impress in other places. So, I think it's very, very interesting. But one thing's for sure, Ronald Koeman has a massive, massive job on his hands. And like you say, I think Messi leaving wouldn't be the worst thing for Barcelona, because I think this rebuild is very, very important for them. And I think Messi is in a part of his career where he wants to win stuff, and he wants to win stuff now. He's not got much longer to win stuff, and he wants to, maintain his status at the top of the game and being the very, very best, and the greatest of all time. So I think it probably is the right thing to do, actually, for Messi to move on. But the problem is, I think he's probably trapped in his own contract. I really do. He's going to have to pay a massive amount for him to get out of it, or another club is going to have to be prepared to pay big bucks for a 33-year-old, so it's going to be very, very interesting. But yeah, James, I suppose I want to explore, like, Barcelona, and they do have very good young players themselves, but actually, if they're having a rebuild this summer, who are the sorts of players that we can expect for them to have their eyes on and look to bring in?
I mean, obviously they have Tobino, who's on the books at the club, but is sort of in limbo as whether he's going to leave or stay. And I think if they'd be able to generate money from the sales of Messi, for example, or Rakitic, he wouldn't need to leave to free up funds. He could stay, and they could look to build up a partnership with Langley. But they also need a left back and a right back. Jordi Alba's not getting any younger. He's not at the level he was, while Semedo hasn't really convinced either. So they're going to need to see if they can bring in, potentially, Serginho Dest from Ajax would be a very good option. They could build a team around him, a similar sort of build to a Trent Alexander-Arnold at right back. He wouldn't be cheap, but he's someone that would offer them something else. He's the kind of Barcelona player which they need. And then if they can replicate that on the left as well, and then, more importantly, add a goal scorer. If Messi and Suarez are leaving, they haven't got that natural number 9, that natural number 10 striker. And who they go for, Lautaro Martinez seems too expensive. I saw Maxi Gomez linked, over the last couple of days as well. It's going to be really hard for him to find someone.
Yeah, there's a massive, massive job for Ronald Koeman.
It's a huge job.
There's been a lot spoken about him because of his time at Everton and stuff like that, but he was doing good things with the Netherlands. They were my tip for the Euros, personally. It's just a shame that he didn't really get a major tournament with them, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Gini Wijnaldum as well. I wonder if Ronald Koeman will come after him. I think there's going to be a big, big build for a club with not much money. In terms of Barcelona, really, for what happens. Coutinho as well, that's another interesting thing. What happens next with him? Is he in Koeman's plans? Will they look to cash in on him? What happens next? It's a big, big job, and we'll end today on let us know what you think in the comments. What next for Barcelona? Thanks, James, for joining me. I hope you enjoyed both parts of this youth show. It's good to be back. The Community Shield at the weekend. We'll be back next week to recap on all of that, all the transfer news of the last week, and everything going on. Cheers, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Ta-ra.